Well, hello everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Fine, good. Thank you, first of all, to the organizers for the invitation, Aline for the wonderful introduction. He's a very experienced guy. Now I feel a lot of pressure that I have to deliver on that experience. What I want to talk about is not necessarily a bullet list of things, you know, as the title says, how can digital help governance? Because these are fairly intuitive. I mean, once you digitize government, you have a more open society, you have more civic engagement, you have transparency, you have, of course, tools to fight corruption. So these are fairly obvious advantages of moving towards digital, not just in government, but the whole transition to a digital economy and society. What I can, and I feel that would be value added, would be to present a little bit of the work that we've done in government, which can be, we believe, replicated in other governments, and it does represent a few significant accomplishments, we would say, but also a new way of doing things. So I gotta say that I'm not a government official. Never was. I was in government for about a year as a state councillor for the Prime Minister. And it was a very interesting interaction wherein I said, I like you guys, I want to work with you. I've never been working for, most of my life I've been working for somebody. I was a social entrepreneur most of the time. And I said, I have all these ideas. If you give me a free hand, we'll come in and we'll do them, but let's try to do it differently. I don't want to deal with the bureaucracy. And the Prime Minister was kind enough to say, okay, could convince me of the you know, the validity of your ideas, and then you can implement them. So the mandate that we had was very, very broad in that we realized as a country that we are falling behind in the digitalization race. So we looked at three key components. One was, how do you help the state become more efficient, as in interacting, you know, government to government, government to business, government to citizens. And of course, we thought about big projects of interoperability, moving the whole state's digital infrastructure into the cloud, and this kind of big projects. The second question that we had to address was, how do you bring in more qualified people into government? Because we talk about how government should digitize, how government needs to, but most of the governments, except for very competitive countries, cannot afford to pay talented people to come into government to do all of that. So there is a severe lack of capacity. So we have to answer that question. How do you bring in talent into the administration to do all these great projects? Now, of course, the third one was, how do you support entrepreneurship? Because the engine of an economy that relies on old-style agriculture, manufacturing, or outsourcing in the IT industry, as is the case in Romania and many countries of this area, is not sustainable, right? You need a more agile engine, and that comes from innovation and from entrepreneurship. So these were the three themes that were on our plate. And we took each of them one by one. For the larger building up a digital infrastructure, we said, okay, this needs to be centralized, put right next to the Prime Minister, within a CIO office, a Chief Information Office of Romania. We established that. Unfortunately, since we've left, the position has been kind of sidetracked and disabled. But the program that I really want to share with you, because I think it's got something there that is not specific to Romania, is a program that was built in a hybrid way as a state program on one hand, but on the other hand, a sort of civic movement, civic society, NGO-ish type of program. The program was called Go IT Hub. And what we did, we said, okay, we don't have, remember I was saying our second priority was how to bring in talent into the administration. We don't have the money to do that in a structured way. We don't have the capacity, but there's so many people that want to actually help. They want to help government because they are interacting with government day to day, right? They have to fill out the forms, they have to go from an office to another. So their frustration turns into a desire for action. So we said, okay, what we can do is open up the government for all these people who want to help, let them loose into the system, and compromise on some of the projects that they work on. So if they want to build something that we don't necessarily need, we'll let them build it, but on the other hand, they can also help by building projects that are really, really needed in the administration. So the program, basically, I'm trying to describe it because I really think that this is basically the one added value that can be carried over into other countries as well, was very simple. We launched a competition for 20 fellows that we actually paid to work full-time. And then we kept everybody else who wanted to compete, we kept them engaged as volunteers. We recruited the 20 fellows. We had about 350 volunteers who actually signed a volunteering contract. And we had about 2,000 other people who said, well, I cannot commit to 8 hours a week, what we require for the formal volunteer title, but I'm willing to help if you have a certain need that fits my specific skill set. And it worked. So within 3 months, this is just ballpark numbers, we saved the government about $1.5 million by building all these applications in different ministries, different agencies, building them for free, basically, paying just for the hardware costs or for the fellowships that we were offering to the 20 fellows. Now, in this process, and that's the program, and I really encourage everybody who wants to and who has access to decision makers to actually look into this program and try to replicate it, because it's fairly easy and it addresses one of the key questions, that is, how do you get talented people to work in government when you cannot pay them competitively? Now, in this process, and I'm not sure how am I doing on time, in this process, we learned, we saw that there is a few advantages in doing this that we didn't think of in the beginning. One of them was that this massive involvement, massive interest, generated interest in civic technology and civic type of work in the IT community. So basically 2016 was a year when we saw springing up different initiatives that had absolutely nothing to do, that were stimulated by the fact that the government was being more open and was willing to try to work with the community. The second thing that we learned was that, oh my God, the type of things you can do once you have access to government data. And I know my former colleague Radu was here yesterday presenting his work on open government partnership and on opening up data. But it is incredible when you can see data from all across the country and you can look at public acquisitions. You can see, okay, in this county they bought light bulbs for 17 lei, and then in this county they bought them for 2 lei, right? There's something going on there. So we realized just how powerful technology and basically bringing in technology into government can be in the fight against corruption at the national level or at the local level. We also realized that the model to transform basically governance from the archaic type of governance, very structured with, it doesn't matter if you're a republic, presidential republic, you have prime minister, you have council of ministers, but it's still very, very structured. The digital age is going to disrupt all of that. It's going to change it. Governance from now on, not necessarily here, not necessarily now, but in the foreseeable future, will have to be interactive because citizens are, they're connected, they have access to technology, they learn and know more and more how to use it. So the old style, going to the polls every 4 years is probably going to be history soon. And therefore, efficient governance has to take into account that this interactive model wherein in some way or another the citizens participate in the running of the country using technology on a daily basis. Now, how exactly will that look? I've heard before the conversation about the disappearance of smartphones, and I can say, in the same paradigm, that government will not necessarily disappear. We'll always have governments, but it will get transformed in ways we don't even understand because of this technologization, digitization of the way the state interacts with stakeholders, so with citizens, with business, and within state institutions. That's about it. That's what I wanted to share with you. I think that it is relevant for this particular conversation, especially when thinking about the fact that more and more data will be produced by governments, will have access to it. So making sure that governance is in the interest of the citizens will be an easier and easier task, of course, for those who have this mandate, who want to do this: journalists, civil society, non-state, basically NGOs, and just your average citizen. Thank you very much. Thank you again for the invitation to the organizers. And we can chat about this later on at the coffee break. Right. Thank you.
One or two questions, if you have. Anyone? Questions?
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. I have one question.
Yeah.
What we actually face is that when people get engaged, but they don't see the results in anti-corruption. You gave an example of the public procurement for 72 days. They actually quit and interact with you because they would report, nothing would happen. There would be, the criminal investigation would be shut down, for example. So next time people would not help and actually get engaged. Do you actually face the same problem? And second, is it easy to convince the government to actually do anything on anti-corruption, to actually use anti-corruption tools that you are talking about?
Well, there's so many questions and so many things that I could share on this. Yes, of course. So what we had different, and I know that this is not necessarily your typical government. This was a technocratic government made up of specialists mostly. So what we had going for us and what really got the people engaged was the honest desire to engage with them. So it wasn't okay, let's run this governmental program so that we do this. It was a really, we didn't know that much as 2,000, 3,000 people would know, and we didn't have that know-how. Remember, I was talking about the lack of human resource within government. So we really wanted their help, and that counts. Of course, if you dismiss them, if you just use them and then throw them out without using their work, of course they're not going to get engaged again. Now, in terms of whether or not the government will be open to to tools that can lead to a more efficient anti-corruption fight, well, I don't think governments have a choice. So it's not really, so it's going to happen. It's not happening now, okay, it's not happening next year, but it is going to happen because more and more data is being produced outside of government. The government, to function, needs to interact with data, and that data doesn't necessarily belong just to the government. So at one point or another, without the government's help, you will be able to see what the government spent money on and where the money went, and then just collect that from civil society, from the NGO sector, and push government to be more accountable. So government will probably be resistant, and I'm not talking about this government or this region of the world, or in general, governments are more resistant to this type of change. But I don't think they have a choice. So in time it will change. Hopefully.
I also have a question. Thank you very much for the presentation. So it is my personal belief that in an era of exponential innovation, a government of people is somehow antiquated. Do you see any chance of transitioning towards, let's say, something like democracy of technological solutions, not necessarily electing the best suited person to do the job, but electing the best solution to do that job?
Well, I wouldn't venture, that's visionary, right? But I wouldn't necessarily venture there as a former student of political science, because the governance of a country is a complex thing, right? So at one point, what do you need people for? You need them to be there to make decisions and to decide between something that is at 50.001% versus 49.999% probability. You need somebody who just owns the decision and says, we're going to go this way. And either way is good, right? So what you're talking about is direct democracy, right? Wherein the people govern themselves. So one problem is decision making. But then the second problem is, the people don't necessarily always understand all the data that is out there in society to be able to make the right decision. So for example, right now if I'm asking you, hey, should we sell this mining company that the state owns, should we sell it and hope that it will make a profit? Now, if we do a poll, nobody here knows whether it's good to sell it or not. You need somebody who's there, who understands the process, who understands whether that's a strategic company that you cannot sell, it's producing something of value, or whether it's got something else to do. So probably in a science fiction future, it will be like that, but I see that as a transition. Step one would be opening up data in the government so we here can hold government accountable. That's what I feel would be